Every beginner runs the same numbers: mortgage, rent, cash flow. But the investors who actually succeed, they know there's hidden red flags that don't show up on the rental property calculator. And if you don't know what they are, you are definitely gambling with your money. So today, I'm gonna walk you through the top 5 rental property red flags that most new investors miss. And I'm gonna show you how to spot them before it's too late. Let's go. Listen, I don't care if the deal looks like it's gonna make $500 on paper. That number means a diddly squat if you didn't notice the ticking time bombs that were baked into the deal. I've seen investors lose thousands of dollars, or worse, even give up on real estate altogether. All because they bought a property that looked good on the spreadsheet but had big problems hidden in plain sight. So pay attention today, because once you know these 5 red flags, you won't be looking at rental properties the same again. Hi, my name is Franchini. Welcome to Brick by Brick Wealth, and I teach aspiring real estate investors how to be successful with their very first rental property. All right, let's get into it. Red flag number 1. The first red flag is really one of the biggest mistakes that beginners make, and it's buying in a bad location. Here's how it usually happens. You're running the numbers, you got your calculator out, and this property looks like it's the best deal in the neighborhood. Maybe the listing says needs some TLC, or maybe the listing says it's move-in ready. Either way, the rent to price ratio is like blowing your socks off. And you're thinking, finally, this is the deal that I've been waiting for. But what you don't see, because it doesn't show up in the calculator, is the neighborhood. Maybe it's in a pocket of town where the crime is really high, or there's a junky house next door, or the school ratings blow. Maybe it's just in an area people don't stay in very long because it's inaccessible to the freeway, hard to get to. So yeah, you can technically get tenants in there, but they'll move out every single year, or they'll stop paying halfway through their lease and move out. And every time that happens and you get a tenant turnover, guess who's footing the bill for repairs, for the vacancy, for the renovations? You. So let me tell you, I have seen more investors lose money and regret the deals that they bought because of the location, because of the neighborhood more than any other factor. They get seduced by cheap properties and this high projected cash flow. They see $500 a month on paper, they think they struck gold, but in reality, that property is just a revolving door of headaches. Constant turnover, constant damage, constant theft, and zero appreciation to boot. So before you know it, you've tied up all your hard-earned money, and you've got a property that's not growing in appreciation, costing you more money than you're making, and you regret every minute of buying it. The truth is, a good deal, no matter how great a deal is, in a bad location is a bad idea. It's a bad deal. And I'll be honest with you, I almost fell for this too when my husband and I bought our very first property. There was a property I looked at, it looked dirt cheap. I mean, think about it. I'm coming from Southern California. I moved to Memphis, where there are $5,000 houses. Heck, there are sometimes $10 houses, a dollar house. They can hardly give them away in some of these neighborhoods. And I thought I was going to be the richest person in the world. I thought I'm going to be like Monopoly. I'm going to win the board. I'm going to win the game. I'm going to buy every house on the block. And why not? Because they're like $5,000. And then you actually go to these neighborhoods. You won't even make it into the property before you turn your car right around and you book it the heck out of there. It sounds exciting. And on paper, it will cash flow like crazy. But is it worth it? No. After I dug deeper in properties like this in Memphis, I realized very, very quickly that these areas were areas that no tenants really wanted to be in. There weren't any stable families that lived here. The school ratings were terrible. The crime was very high. Drive-bys at night, tons of theft. You couldn't leave your car in the driveway. You would get break-ins and burglaries in your house in the middle of the night. Tenants wanted to leave these areas as fast as they could, and renting in these areas was only a means to an end. You have to expect high cash flow for the high risk you're going to get. But even then, usually 9 out of 10 investors will tell you it wasn't worth it. You're going to get little to no appreciation in equity in your property, which also means you're not going to be able to increase your rents. And that's why I tell my students in my coaching program, Successful Rental Properties, all the time, Don't chase the high cash flow. Chase the right location. Look for areas with strong job growth, solid schools, and low crime. You want to buy in areas where families and tenants want to stay. They want to be there for a long time. An area that they're proud to live in. Not an area where they're just passing through and are hoping to get out as soon as they make more money. If you're not sure how to tell a good neighborhood from the bad neighborhoods, this is one of the most important beginner skills that you must learn before you even think about making offers or talking to realtors in an area where you're looking to invest. Highly recommend you watch, I don't know where I'm going to put it, my video on ABCD rental property neighborhoods. I'll put a link down in the description box below. Remember this, cash flow will pay your bills for now, but appreciation and stability, that is what is going to build your wealth. If you ignore this red flag that I'm telling you today and you buy houses in terrible neighborhoods, cheap houses in bad neighborhoods, you will regret it. If you ignore this number one red flag, the deal that you thought was your ticket to financial freedom might be the thing that ends up scaring you out of real estate altogether. All right, red flag number 2 is buying a property with tenants already in place. On the surface, beginners think this is a blessing, right? Instant cash flow, someone's paying your rent from day one. And it can be a blessing if everything goes right and you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing and you buy an inherited tenant property, it could be a massive mistake. If you're considering buying a property with tenants already in place, inheriting tenants in a rental property, here is the checklist of things that you need to make sure you go through before you say yes. So get out your pencil and paper and write these down. 1, are they paying market rent? If they're locked into a long-term lease way below market rent, you are in the hole because as the new owner, you are inheriting the lease agreement that comes with the property. You are not able to change the lease agreement or cancel it on a tenant because you're the new owner. So if that lease agreement has several more years way below market rent, you are stuck with that tenant paying that market rent until the lease expires. 2, was the tenant that's in place actually screened by the current owner? Ask for the applications, the background checks, and the proof of income. If the owner doesn't have it, it's a giant red flag because if they weren't screened, you are the one that will be inheriting the high risk. Number 3, what's their payment history? And this one is huge. You need to ask for the ledgers and you want to see the rent roll of all the months that they have paid rent. Did they pay on time every month? Are you seeing late payments? Are you seeing split payments or the owner or property manager working with them to get their rent paid on time? Are you seeing partial payments or months where nothing came in? Are you seeing late fees? A pattern of late rent will continue to be a pattern of late rent. And now it's your problem. Another thing with verifying the tenant's property history is making sure that they're not under an active eviction. Several years ago, I had a student who was buying a rental property in New York. They joined my coaching program while they were already under contract with another rental property, and they joined my program because they wanted to learn how to invest out of state. But they hadn't completed the purchase on that first property, and I said, hey, let me take a look at that deal too. Let's see what's going on with it. They were still under contract in the escrow period in the time that they could back out. They were in contract on a property in New York where it's a very tenant-friendly state. Well, after going through their paperwork and all the things that they had told me, I realized that there was some shady things going on with the seller. Told my students to ask the listing agent for X, Y, and Z, certain paperwork pertaining to the tenant. The paperwork was not provided. Come to find out, the tenant was under eviction, and that is why the owner was selling. The tenant hadn't paid for several months. They had filed something about domestic abuse, and in New York, you may not have to pay rent for the duration of your lease if you are a victim of domestic violence. So this was a huge issue for my new student to continue the purchase of that property. They backed out, thank goodness. So let that be a lesson for you, that whenever there is a tenant in place, you need to verify that the tenant is in good standing and that they're paying rent on time. And whenever possible, get that information signed from the owner. Okay, number 4, the fourth thing on the checklist. Is there a security deposit? If the current owner didn't collect one, or it's suspiciously a very small security deposit, that's a red flag. A deposit shows that a tenant has skin in the game. No deposit, that could be a signal that the landlord was desperate to fill a vacancy. Also, be sure that you see the lease agreement and you do verify that there was, in fact, no deposit. I just saw in a Facebook group this week, somebody made a post that they were complaining that they bought a property and the seller said that the tenant did not provide a security deposit. 3 months later, the tenant said, I'm moving out, I want my security deposit. The lease was furnished, and lo and behold, it stated that the tenant had provided a security deposit. So please be sure that you do get the lease agreement before you close on the property, because if you have a security deposit, you need that transferred over at closing. Fifth thing on the checklist, what condition is the property in right now? Get inside the property. Look for damage, neglect, or signs that the tenants just don't care about the place. A property's condition tells you a lot about the people who are living in it. If they're trashing it now under their current ownership, what makes you think that they're going to do any different when you own it? Red flag number 3 is hidden HOA and fees. And I'm telling you, this one can be a dream killer. Let me share another Facebook story that I read not too long ago. A girl bought a short-term rental in Florida. The property was around $500,000 and she poured at tens of thousands of dollars into getting this property beautiful and Pinterest ready to rent on Airbnb. She had the furniture, the design, she even hired a designer. She had everything lined up to start cash flowing amazingly right out of the gate. But then, upon her first listing, she got in trouble and found out that the HOA didn't allow short-term rentals. She literally could not list it on any short-term rental site. Her neighbors were watching and telling on her when she did. Imagine that. You sink all your money into buying an expensive property, furnish it and everything, to find out that you can't even rent it out. She had just bought it, so she wasn't going to make any money if she sold it. And because it was a luxury property, she wasn't going to cash flow as a long-term rental either. She was in a bad situation, and I don't know what ended up happening to her. But this is why I tell my students, never assume. Always double check the HOA bylaws. Make sure you read the restrictions before you buy. And please don't take the listing agent's word for it either. Get the documents, read them, and verify. But it's not just HOAs. Even long-term rental areas can have restrictions. Here's another story. I knew an investor who bought a duplex, and he thought the numbers were tight, but it was workable, and it was near him, so it was going to be a good investment. What he didn't realize was that the property sat in a flood zone. That meant mandatory flood insurance, and suddenly their $200 a month net positive cash flow turned negative. On top of that, property values had just been reassessed and their property taxes doubled. So between the flood insurance and the new property tax increase, the deal was upside down in its very first year. So what do we have to learn here? Well, it's simple. Don't just run the easy numbers. Look for the hidden ones, the HOA fees, the special assessments, the flood zones, property tax increases, insurance, taxes, management fees, all the things. If you don't account for them up front, you'll find out later, and it might make your cash flow go negative. All right, red flag number 4 is deferred maintenance. This is one of the sneakiest traps that new investors fall for. Beginners usually think, oh, look, the place is fresh and clean. It's been painted. It's got new flooring. Maybe it was a flip, and I'm not going to have to do anything to get this property rent ready. It's ready to go right away. And they're happy, right? They don't want to do any renovations at all. They would love something move-in ready, and I do too. But when you see fresh paint and a flipped property, you're going to have to put your red flag in the air. Fresh paint, new carpet, flipped properties are the cheapest tricks in real estate, and they can hide years of neglect. I can't tell you how many times I have seen properties for sale that have just been painted, just a fresh coat of paint, new flooring, and call it a renovation. But what's not showing up in the listing photos, and listing photos are misleading, what's not showing up is that the roof is 20 years old and leaking. It's that the HVAC is old. It hasn't been serviced in a decade and it's on its last leg with maybe 5 years left. And guess what that means? The day that you buy it, next year, it's breaking. Murphy's Law. It's also hiding that the plumbing is old. Maybe it's original cast iron and it's about to collapse any minute. Or the foundation has cracks. The basement walls are crumbling. Those things are not going to be in the description or in those pretty listing photos. Because when you're a beginner, and it's not your fault, but you don't know to look for these things. You're blinded by the shiny finishes. You love that it looks brand new. You think you're getting a turnkey rental, but what you're really buying is lipstick on a pig. And that's exactly why I hate flips. I have been in real estate for almost 18 years. I have seen thousands of properties and a lot of flips. And there is maybe a very short list of flipped properties that I think were done well. Flippers make properties look nice. They want them to look beautiful, so you don't look behind the walls and see all the mechanicals that are breaking and falling apart. They cut corners everywhere to save costs because flippers are in it to make money. They're looking for a profit. They don't care about the long-term quality of the materials that they're putting in the property because they are selling it, and that future problem is going to be somebody else's problem. They're not redoing the roof or putting in a new HVAC. Why? Because those things really don't raise the value of a property, unfortunately. So instead, they focus on cosmetics. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a new bathroom, things that photograph well. So you've got to stop assuming that cosmetic upgrades means move-in ready and quality. Always check the big ticket items first. Roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and foundation. Those are the things that drain your bank account. And if you have a property with a basement, add that onto the list. Paint and flooring are pennies compared to a new HVAC system or a new roof. I had a student who almost bought a property just like one of these. Looked gorgeous inside, had granite countertops, brand new cabinets, it was painted nicely all throughout the property, it had new floors. But during inspection, we found out that the sewer line was cracked. The repair quote alone for that item was $12,000. If they had skipped that inspection, they wouldn't have seen that red flag. And that pretty looking house would have eaten their profits for the first year. So luckily, they were able to back out. All right, red flag number 5 is unrealistic rental projections. This one trips up so many beginners because rent is the number that's going to make or break your deal. And most beginners get it all wrong right from the get-go. Here's what happens. You pull up Zillow or Rentometer or whatever, and it pulls up a rental estimate for the property. You think, oh, perfect, it's gonna rent for $2,000 a month. And you run your numbers with that amount, and it looks like it cash flows, boom, you go buy it. But that number doesn't mean anything until you can prove it with actual comps. Zillow isn't signing your lease. Rentometer isn't cutting you a check. The market decides what tenants are willing to pay, not some online algorithm that doesn't have eyes and can't see the actual condition of the property. I've seen a lot of new investors. The property is going to rent for, say, $2,000 a month, but easy comps show it's going to be $1,600 a month max. So here's how you avoid this. 1, you have to check your own comps. You have to know how to do the work. You can't just skimp it and think some online algorithm tool is going to get the right answer for you. It won't. You need to do your own rental comps the same way that a real estate appraiser does sales comps. Look at what properties like that actually rented for in a 1-mile radius or really even closer in that neighborhood alone in the past 3 to 6 months. You want same bed, bath count, similar age, similar location, similar school district, and crime. Next, talk to property managers in the area. They know what properties and areas are moving fast and what properties and areas are sitting. Also, study the days on the market. If similar properties to your subject property are taking 60 days to rent, you'll probably have to lower your price to get your property filled. So what did we learn today? Well, we learned that most beginners fall for these red flags, not because they chose the wrong strategy, but because they ignored the red flags, because they didn't know exactly how to vet the property thoroughly. A property in a bad location disguised as a great deal, inheriting tenants that were never properly screened, fresh paint covering years of neglect, HOA fees blindsiding you, and rent projections based on some random computer algorithm other than based on reality. Any one of these can turn what looks like a good investment into a freaking nightmare. But the great part is that once you know how to spot these red flags, and now you do, you will be able to see properties completely differently. You'll stop getting tricked by all these surface level numbers, and you'll start evaluating deals like an experienced real estate investor. And that's exactly what I teach. How to analyze properties confidently and accurately so you don't lose money on your first rental property. If you want more help with this, I've linked a free training down below to help you get started step by step. And if you want to dig even deeper into these classic beginner mistakes, check out my video on the 6 reasons why new investors fail. It's the perfect follow-up to this one. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have enjoyed this video or learned something, please tell me what it was in the comments below. And do me a favor, I work so hard making these videos. I would be so appreciated if you could subscribe to my channel, like the video, ring the bell, and comment down below. And until next time, keep building your wealth brick by brick.